Visualize passing away due to an illness only to be brought before God. And when you're blessed with an almighty tool that lets you live out your dreams as a farmer, you start to attract dangerous monsters that seek out your power. The anime follows our MC, Hiraka Machio, a 39-year-old man who had fallen ill and passed away due to his terminal illness, only to be brought before God. God says they're willing to give Hiraku a second chance at life. And when God asks if there is anything Hiraku wants in particular, Hiraku says he wants to try farming in his new life. Intrigued by the request, God contacts the god of agriculture to help bless Hiraku's new body. And to top things off, Hiraku is granted the almighty farming tool to make his life easier. Just like that, God sends Hiraku into his new body, waking up in a mysterious forest only to jump with joy seeing as he feels great in his new body. With his dreams of a farmer flashing through his mind, Hiraku scans the surrounding forest, only to question what he should do. Remembering the almighty farming tool he was given, Hiraku magically conjures a hoe only to begin breaking apart the soil beneath him, surprised to see the dirt is quite soft and fluffy. Realizing that he needs to find food and water to survive, Hiraku tries listening for any water stream nearby, but sadly only the rustling of leaves can be heard. When Hiraku begins trekking through the forest, he fails to find any edible plants, suddenly turning as he hears something scurry by him. Seeing as dangerous animals may reside in the forest, Hiraku speeds up his search only to bump into a massive tree where he marks as his home base. Even after searching for a while, Hiraku fails to find any water nearby, choosing to rely on some dowsing rods to help locate any underground water sources. Funnily, the dowsing rods don't work, leading Hiraku to conjure a shovel with his almighty farming tool, realizing that the almighty tool can morph into any basic farming equipment he desires. Interestingly, Hiraku sees that he can dig forever without getting tired, choosing to burrow deep underground until he strikes gold in the form of a water source. Back on the surface, Hiraku says he doesn't feel hungry at all, grateful for whatever blessings God gave him. Seeing as it's still too dangerous to venture into the forest, Hiraku begins clearing up the area around his base with his mighty tool, only to run into a tree that is in his way. Calling for an axe, Hiraku charges up a swing to chip away at the tree, but monstrously a single swing takes down the entire tree. Hiraku is amazed by the power of the almighty farming tool, swiftly conjuring a hatchet to help process the tree, and magically it slices and slides through the tree trunk like butter. Working throughout the day, Hiraku gathers his lumber into a pile, reasoning that he should start building a home, but fears he doesn't have any nails or adhesive to bind the wood together. With the sun beginning to set, Hiraku tries calling for some matches to start a fire, but sadly nothing happens. Racking his brain for an alternative solution, Hiraku conjures a magnifying glass, but sadly the sun has set before he can put it to use. Choosing to carve a hole in the massive tree, Hiraku spends his time carving some utensils with a chisel, only to be mesmerized by the two moons in the night sky. Having stayed up all night to experiment with different wood carvings, Hiraku rehydrates the next day using his underground water source, only to finally start a fire using his magnifying glass. Spending several hours clearing out more of the surrounding scenery, Hiraku says he doesn't feel fatigued whatsoever whilst using the almighty farming tool, but fearing that his exhaustion may catch up to him, Hiraku begins making plans to hunt for something. Right on cue, a ravenous-looking bunny rushes towards Hiraku, and before he knows it, he slays the creature, choosing to roast it over his fire for his first meal in this new world. Although the roasted bunny wasn't the tastiest, Hiraku continues setting up his home base by installing a wooden toilet with a decent filtration system, and with some added walls and a roof over the toilet. Hiraku can finally relieve himself in peace. Getting back to work, Hiraku begins tilling the soil in preparation for his farm. And as he works throughout the day to create 3 soil patches, he realizes that he doesn't have any seeds to grow. A little annoyed, Hiraku stuffs himself with any leftover rabbit only to head to bed. But when he awakens the next day, he is surprised to see several sprouts growing in his soil patches. Wondering if the almighty farming tool helped with this miracle, Hiraka gets fired up to nurture his new plants as he begins creating a ditch and adding some fencing to prevent wild rabbits from invading his patches. Moving forward a few days, Hiraku is seen expanding his farm and finishing up his fencing around his home, only to wonder if the rabbits he's been slaying have been trying to hunt him. Regardless, Hiraku uses his almighty tool to help water his plants, noting how they grow faster with the almighty tool's touch. In the coming days, Hiraku finally finishes creating his first small hut. Hiraku is proud that the entire structure was made out of wood, spending his nights in the hut and away from the monsters that lurk in the forest, only to continue nurturing his farm during the day. Interestingly enough, Hiraku runs into a pair of dogs on a particular day, and seeing as they don't seem to be hostile, Hiraku invites them into his home. Having slain a giant boar, Hiraku spares some of the meat he harvested, only to notice one of the dogs is currently pregnant, suspecting that the canines are looking for a safe place to give birth. Hiraku says he always wanted a pet dog, but out of nowhere the female dog begins to writhe in pain, signaling to Hiraku that she is about to give birth. Quickly taking the dogs to his hut, Hiraku reasons he should fetch the dog some water, and seeing as the female dog is in pain, Hiraku places a fire outside the hut for the dogs, all whilst he spends his night back in the hole in the tree. Hiraku says it's a relief that the giant boar he slayed didn't find the dogs first, and as Hiraku knocks out for the night, he awakens the next day to a pleasant surprise, with the female dog managing to give birth to 4 smaller pups. Hiraku celebrates a successful delivery by feeding the dogs some fatty meat, and as some more time passes, the dogs eventually become fond of living with Hiraku. Hiraku chose to create a separate, bigger home for himself, whilst the dogs were given a small hut. Plus, it seems some of Hiraku's plants are finally sprouting, with his first harvest containing tomatoes. Over time, the dogs would help hunt monsters and guard Hiraku's farm, leading Hiraku to begin naming them, starting with Kuro for the father dog and Yuki for the mother, whilst the children were called Kuro 1, Kuro 2, Kuro 3, and Kuro 4. With even the dogs enjoying the vegetables he grows, Hiraku says he needs to build a storage room and build more furniture and tools to make his life easier, excited to see what is to come in the future. At night, we see a hooded lady asking for a way to cross the nearby mountain, but a townsfolk says it is too dangerous to cross the mountain since she'll need to pass through the forest of death. Cutting over to God, we see him checking in on how Hiraku is doing, only to feel bad seeing as Hiraku was spawned into the forest of death with nothing to go on. Luckily, Hiraku is doing pretty well, having managed to grow potato, onions, tomatoes, and cabbages with the help of his almighty tool, and strangely whatever plant Hiraku was thinking about when he was tilling the soil was ultimately the plant that began magically growing after using the almighty farming tool. Hiraku suspects that most plants bear vegetables after 2 weeks, and upon inspecting the potatoes, Hiraku realizes that the potatoes grown near the root are actually poisonous, information he commits to heart. Hiraku also shows off the statues he carved of the agriculture and creator god as a way to thank them for his new life. And as Hiraku sits down for a stew he created with his homegrown vegetables and the meat he hunted and drained, Hiraku says he could definitely use some seasoning to spice up his meals. Hiraku reasons he should start planting some fruit plants as well, placing them outside his fence, seeing as they'll take a while to grow, and in the meantime Hiraku plays fetch with the dogs. Hiraku is glad to have others to spend time with, surprised to see the dogs have horns, and interestingly enough Hiraku can use them to help navigate through the forest. With the help of Kuro's keen senses, Hiraku stumbles onto a river that could act as a reliable water source. And with Hiraku wanting to dig a path from the river all the way back to his home, he first sets up a toilet near the river in case of emergencies. Having transformed his almighty tool into a wheelbarrow, Hiraku says he can transport things around more faster, and back at home base he has begun expansion of his fields. Hiraku begins to add oilseed plants to help with the production of oil, wheat to yield flour, and sugarcane for sugar. Off to the side, Hiraku sees that his soybean plants have grown, but sadly he has no salt to enjoy them as edamame. And before he knows it, some more time has passed and the surroundings have gotten more cold. Hiraku says he can see snow forming on the nearby mountains, fearing what winter has installed for him. And having failed to use the rabbit's fur as additional layers of clothing, Hiraka chooses to stock up for the winter. Out of nowhere, Kuro introduced Hiraku to a fluffy-looking spider, a creature that is able to produce silk and weave them into clothing for Hiraku. Hiraka gladly allows the spider to stay in his giant tree, all whilst feeding it some potatoes in exchange for some warm clothing. Surprisingly, the spider also decks out Hiraka's home with some sheets for his bed, pillows, and curtains, ultimately bestowing the name of Zabuton. As snow falls on Hiraku's home, he chooses to lock himself away in his house where his fire pit keeps him warm and his harvested vegetables keep him fed, but Hiraku begins to feel lonely, wondering when he'll get to speak with people again. With time flying by, winter eventually passes and Hiraku returns to his daily routine. But interestingly, Kuro and Yuki's pups have all grown up and began venturing into the nearby forest. Not even a day later, the pups return with partners of their own. And as for Zabuton, it seems she had given birth to children of her own. More motivated than ever to expand his farm, to feed his expanding family. But suddenly Hiraku's companions alert Hiraku to something dangerous nearby, prompting Hiraku to rush and check it out. Deep in the forest, Hiraku runs into a shy-looking girl who has been cornered by his companions. But as the girl asks for help, Hiraku's companions prepare to attack her. Hiraku calls for everyone to stand down, preparing to hand the girl some clothing to cover up, but suddenly she leaps onto Hiraku, swiftly biting his neck. Having tasted his blood, the girl begins to transform and grow before Hiraku's eyes. But before Hiraku can ask who she is, Hiraku's dogs attack her, forcing her to revert back into her smaller form. Hiraku learns that the girl had to suck his blood to replenish her strength. And funnily enough, when she tried devouring one of Hiraku's companions prior, she was brutally beaten by them. Feeling bad for the poor girl, Hiraku allows her to refuel and suck his blood, surprisingly feeling fine due to his healthy body blessing from the gods. Taking the girl back to his base, Hiraku sees that she is drawn to the tomato he has grown, a plant she isn't familiar with. As the girl munches on a juicy tomato, he gladly shows her around his farm, both spending the day chatting and having fun, only to retreat into Hiraku's home for the night. Hiraku hears that the girl's name is Rururushi the vampire, a being capable of wielding magic and also researches medicinal plants. Ru says some nobles were after her research, so they chased her into the forest. But luckily, Ru has been saved and plans to study the plants Hiraku has grown before she leaves. Hiraku hears that the forest he lives in is quite dangerous, and that his almighty farming tool is magic Ru has never seen before. But seeing as it's the perfect chance, Hiraku begs Ru to stay with him forever as he doesn't want to be lonely. Flustered by the proposal, Ru cries that she's a vampire, but Hiraku could care less as he wants someone to spend the rest of his life with. Funnily enough, Hiraku gets embarrassed having realized he has just confessed his love to Ru, but Ru doesn't mind agreeing to live forever with Hiraku. The next morning, Hiraku is back on his farming duties, warmly greeting Ru, who has just awoken. Ru says she is in her smaller form to prevent Hiraku from embracing her whilst he's all dirty. But Hiraku says Ru is their first official villager, uttering that he can help Ru grow some medicinal herbs if she likes. Later that night, we see another mysterious girl asking for directions through the forest of death, strangely uttering that she'll be fine with traveling through the forest.